Greetings, pardon me, Anyways, in this documentation, thy report shall be given orally by the speaker myself. So go next to thy hearth, retrieve thy pottage and pillow bear, and prepare for thy history documentation. Or I can translate that from 1600s white person talk. Hello everyone, how are you? Excuse me, how are you? Anyways, in this video, I will give a history of the Salem Witch Trials verbally. So, go sit at your fireplace, grab your porridge and pillow. Here is my history of the Salem Witch Trials. Let's begin, shall we? On November 21st, 1620, 400 years ago, exactly, just not to the date, although I did make a whole video on it on the actual date, the 400th anniversary, the Pilgrims on the Mayflower arrived in North America in what is now Plymouth, Massachusetts. Why do we care? Not because of their stench, their diseases, their happy demeanor, or their stupid accents, but because of what they brought over from their mother colonizer, Great Britain. Religion, of course, more specifically, Puritan Christianity, a runaway sect of Protestantism. You see, Puritans had many taboos, myths, legends, and many rules. These were like the annoying HOA people of the day. They had many examples of punishable crimes, which they called capital crimes, like idolatry, blasphemy, murder, and also witchcraft. In 1626, the Pilgrims created a new settlement north of Plymouth, pretty far north of Plymouth, known as Nauchaig. It was supposed to be inclusive as it's a native word, but they thought it sounded bad as in the word, which I agree with, so they thought the following: what religion is good for naming our towns something nice and happy and has some good Christian values, because we need to create a good Christian Minecraft server. I mean, a good Christian Puritan village. How about Hebrew? Since none of us know a word of it. And so they chose the Hebrew word for peace for their town name, Salem. 3 years later, in 1629, the many Puritan towns popping up left and right over Massachusetts were collectively placed into a single, unified British colony, the Massachusetts Bay Colony, which was spelled a lot more different than you think, and Massachusetts was named after the Wampanoag native word for Great Hill, as in Boston. Now, Salem, Massachusetts has been established. Life in Salem, Massachusetts was joyous as could be. In it, you could find fire hazard buildings left and right, the lovely things known as tuberculosis and smallpox, pilgrims and natives constantly killing and making peace with each other and repeating the process, and a crazy strict church. Back in Europe, people had been following strict religions too, but also calling and accusing each other of being witches, which was no laughing matter for them at the time. Those in Salem would continue their regular pilgrim life until something odd happened. In 1688, a 13-year-old girl named Martha Goodwin, who was in the middle of an argument with another woman named Goody Glover over her accusing her of stealing her laundry, grew hostile with each other. Annoyed, Goodwin returned to her home. Over the next week, she began showing odd behavior and began to show the same behaviors with her siblings, who began acting weirdly. The Goodwin family accused Goody Glover of bewitching them, and thus being a witch. Glover would be hung, although being the last woman to be killed in the Salem Witch Trials. In 1689, Samuel Parris became minister of Salem. On January 20th, 1692, his daughter Elizabeth began having unexplained behavior too, and so she was visited by the highly trained and well-equipped doctor of Salem, Dr. Griggs, who was fantastic at his job. So good, in fact, he couldn't read. He suggested that it must have been a neurologic condition. Just kidding, that makes sense, so it couldn't have been that. No, he said it must have been witchcraft. After the Reverend's daughter, along with some other random girl I don't care about, she was treated like a saint. And so they were given the power to choose who bewitched them. Of course, they picked the only slave of African descent in Salem, a slave named Tituba, along with two other women named Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne. Why did they accuse Tituba? They said she gave a witch cake to a dog, making it a witch dog. Makes sense, right? No? It's the Pilgrims would expect. The other residents believed every word they said, and so all three women were arrested. Tituba would be in and out of prison for a long time, Sarah Good would be hung, and Sarah Osborne would be the first of all accused people to die. in this case of poor jail conditions. Through March of 1692, Anna Putnam Jr. began acting erratically and later accused Martha Corey of witchcraft, who would be hung. Corey was also accused of witchcraft by her own husband. Talking about true love. The rest of the women accused in March of 1692 were Rebecca Nurse, who was hung, a 4-year-old named Dorothy Good, who was left on the streets for the next 8 years to die alone and homeless, Elizabeth Proctor, who was released from prison since she was pregnant, Sarah Cloysa, sister of Rebecca Nurse, and was let free. These Puritans are kind of dumb people. On this day, February 28th, 329 years ago, in 1692, the Salem Witch Trials began. On April 11th, 1692, John Proctor became the first man to be accused of witchcraft, or being a warlock, aka a male witch. He was placed in prison and would be released later on. Later, Mary Warren, one of the girls who had been accusing others for a long time, admitted to lying. Yet, that didn't stop her victims from being dished out their punishments. Now for rapid accusations from April to July of 1692, those killed were Bridget Bishop, Rebecca Nurse, Roger Toothaker, Susanna Martin, who supposedly caused a lightning bolt to crash into the courtroom during her trial. I bet that was true. Sarah Wilds, Sarah Good, and Elizabeth Howell. The other accused people who were not killed were Dorcas Hoare, Sarah Churchill, and Elizabeth Payne, who my direct ancestor, Joseph Whipple, accused of witchcraft. Really? I don't want to be from this bloodline of stupid. Many other people accused didn't really get anything notable happen to them, so I don't need to mention them here, and I need to save time. Moving on. Starting in September of 1692, the Puritans grew tired of just hanging people. It was so boring, so they created new forms of executions. On September 19th, 1692, Giles Corey, wife of a supposed witch, was crushed with large stones and would miraculously live another 2 days before dying. Another unnamed woman was tested out to be a witch by being anchored into a river and then being dumped in. If she floated, she would be deemed a witch and would be killed. If she sank and drowned, she would be deemed not a witch but would still be dead. Problem solved. These pilgrims, people. In October of 1692, Governor Phipps halted further execution and trials very graciously, because let's just say everyone who was not from Salem thought the witch trials were really, really stupid. In January of 1693, he denied Judge Stoughton's request of continuing executions. Finally, something good. Also in January, Phipps freed 49 more people accused of witchcraft. As for one of the first people accused, Tituba, she would be released just to be sent as a slave to another guy. That's nice. And Samuel Parris, who was one of the people who started and kicked off the Salem Witch Trials, was booted from being minister of Salem and sunk into the shadows. Finally, ending the Salem Witch Trials. With its end, 25 people were dead, including another 2 dogs who were killed of supposed witchcraft. So dumb. And also, 100 people, just about, had been accused of witchcraft. Now let's see what the non-Salem residents of the world had to say about the witch trial, shall we? In 1702, the Salem General Court declared that the Salem witch trials were unlawful. In 1706, Anna Putnam Jr., who was one of the accusers, became subject of harassment for accusing so many innocent people, to which she was forced to apologize and would fade into the back of history books. In 1711, the Massachusetts Bay Colony passed a bill to give those who were still living and were accused gold as restitution. In 1957, Massachusetts formally apologized for the Salem witch trials, and in 1992, for the 300th anniversary of the start of the Salem witch trials, Salem erected a memorial to those who were killed. And with that was my history of the Salem Witch Trials. Thanks so much for watching. I'm proud to say I have actually been to Salem, Massachusetts, and Oregon, and I recommend visiting. If you do visit, know that the city has a lot of black buildings and like old spooky alleys, so it feels very spooky and a little bit ominous there. They even have a museum dedicated to Satan. Anyways, thanks for watching. My next video is going to be on a totally new format. It will be a top 10 video. In it, I will be counting down the 10 most influential women in history for March, which is Women's History Month. So yeah, it will be coming out on March 5th. Thanks so much for watching.